Hello and welcome to this online lesson. I am Mr. Hoven, and if you remember from last time, we were talking about growing tensions out west, kind of starting the split between the North and the South. You were getting these increased feelings of sectionalism, that pride and devotion to your section or your state rather than the entire country. We looked at different compromises that were trying to keep this nation that was splitting apart together. One of them being the Missouri Compromise, the Compromise of 1850. We also looked at the Kansas-Nebraska Act and how that led to Bleeding Kansas, the Border Ruffians, as well as looking at John Brown's actions at Pottawatomie Creek and the caning of Senator Charles Sumner because of his opinion and his criticism of pro-slavery individuals in the Senate. So, let's go ahead and get started. Now, it wasn't just out west that these splits were happening. It was also back east in the government of the United States, especially in the congressional elections of 1854. In 1854, additional anti-slavery Whigs and Democrats joined forces with the Free Soilers to form the Republican Party. Again, it was a combination of Whigs and Free Soilers came together to form the Republican Party. They challenged the pro-slavery individuals in the government. Their main message was that the government should ban slavery from the new territories. The Republican Party quickly showed its strength in the North. In the elections, the Republicans won control of the House of Representatives and of several state seats. In the South, the Republican Party had almost no support. So in the North, the Republicans, again, anti-slavery, are getting support. And in the South, almost no support. Okay, almost 3/4 of the Democratic candidates from free states up in the North, so the Democrats, again, are the people that supported slavery, lost their seats in 1854. And the Democrats were increasingly becoming a Southern party. So again, North, you're getting the Republican Party, and in the South, the Democrats. And it's fixing for a split and a showdown. And the split and the sectionals and that pride and devotion to one section, not necessarily the nation as a whole, was extremely prevalent in the election of 1856. In the 1856 presidential election, the Republicans, again, who were formed from anti-slavery Whigs and the Free Soil Party, chose John C. Fremont of California as their candidate for president. The party platform called for free territories, and its campaign slogan became Free Soil, Free Speech, and Fremont. The Democratic Party nominated James Buchanan of Pennsylvania, an experienced diplomat and former member of Congress. Buchanan wanted to appease the South in order to save the Union, and as a result, the party endorsed this idea of popular sovereignty, that is, allowing the states to decide the issue of slavery through a popular vote. The government really didn't say much, it was up to the states to decide. And the Know Nothing Party, which is a very small party, nominated former President Millard Fillmore. The presidential vote was divided along rigid and firm and flexible sectional lines, and if you look at the map on this side, you can see the difference in the North and in the South. Buchanan won the election. He took all southern states except Maryland and received 174 electoral votes compared to the 114 for Fremont and 8 for Fillmore. Fremont did not receive a single electoral vote south of the Mason-Dixon line, but he carried 11 of the 16 free states. So, just something to think about. The North had their candidate, the South had their candidate. That sectional line, it's showing the nation is splitting because the North are going with that whole idea, it's over slavery, it's also over states' rights, but you're seeing that split in the country. And along with all of these building tensions came a Supreme Court case that would forever change the attitudes about slavery in the North and in the South. Dred Scott v. Sanford. Now, Dred Scott was an enslaved African American who was bought by an army doctor in Missouri, which was a slave state. So he was bought in Missouri as slave state. In the 1830s, the doctor moved his household, his family, to Illinois. Dred Scott went with them, but Illinois, again, is a free state. So he was in a slave state, bought there, then he was brought to a free state. And this, again, there's no slavery allowed. So, later the family returned to Missouri, where the doctor died. And in 1846, Scott sued for his freedom. He claimed that he should be free because once he lived in an area of the North where slavery was prohibited. 11 years later, as anger grew over the slavery issue, the case reached the Supreme Court. It attracted enormous attention across the country. While the immediate issue was Dred Scott's status, the court also had the opportunity to rule on the question of slavery in the territories. So in the Supreme Court decision, in the case of Dred Scott v. Sanford, Chief Justice Roger B. Taney stated that as such, Dred Scott that is not a citizen and has no right to bring a lawsuit in federal court. He wrote that Dred Scott's residence in free soil did not make him a free man. He stated that because he was a slave, he was property. And due to the Fifth Amendment, Congress cannot take property away from an individual without due process of law. He went on to say, this is Justice Taney, the Supreme Court, laying down the law, speaking it to the people, that Congress had no power to prohibit slavery. He basically said that Missouri Compromise, no way, ain't gonna happen. That's unconstitutional. It goes against the Constitution. He also said that popular sovereignty was against the Constitution as well, because not even the voters in a territory could prohibit slavery, because that would be taking away a person's property. In effect, that this decision meant that the Constitution protected slavery, upheld that slavery is okay. So rather than settling this issue of slavery in the West, or slavery altogether, it just divided the country even more. Again, those sectional lines. You got the North and you got the South. More devotion to your section rather than the entire country as a whole. The Supreme Court had upheld the notion that nothing could legally stop the spread of slavery. So whatever you're doing to stop the spread of slavery, that's illegal. It's unjust. You can't do it. Not gonna happen. Republicans and other abolitionists, people who wanted to get rid of slavery, were outraged, and this further split America along those sectional lines. The Republicans were outraged. They called Dred Scott, or the decision in the Dred Scott case, a wicked and false judgment, and the greatest crime ever committed in the nation's courts. Again, this nation is fixing for a war. And it was around this time that future President Abraham Lincoln came into the political spectrum. He ran against Stephen A. Douglas in the congressional election of 1858. People considered Douglas a likely candidate for president in 1860, and Lincoln at this time was pretty much an unknown. Douglas was called the Little Giant. He disliked slavery, but thought that the controversy over it would interfere with the nation's growth. It would split the nation apart. Lincoln, on the other hand, saw slavery as morally wrong, but admitted there was no easy way to end slavery where it existed. So these two are running against each other. Now, at this time, Lincoln wanted to debate, and Douglas reluctantly said, all right, we're going to debate. So across the state of Illinois, they held these town hall debates where they debated, and the biggest issue was slavery. And that came up quite a bit. Now, at the end of the Lincoln-Douglas debates, there was the election, and Douglas won a narrow victory. Very, very narrow, by the skin of his teeth. But however, Lincoln won something from this too. Although he didn't win the seat in Congress, he won fame. He won national reputation as a man of clear thinking who could argue his point well and a charismatic speaker, leaving people to consider him as a possibility for the president in 1860. Now, we all remember our good pal, Mr. John Brown. Now, John Brown has not just stopped his antics. After the 1858 election, Southerners felt threatened by Republicans. In late 1859, an act of violence added to their fears. On October 16th, the abolitionist John Brown led a group on a raid on Harper's Ferry, Virginia. His target was an arsenal. It was a building filled of weapons, ammunition, and guns. And this was his hope to arm enslaved African Americans and start a revolt against slaveholders and get rid of these slave-holding individuals altogether. However, this didn't work out too well. There were very few slaves that lived in the area, and John Brown and his men were quickly defeated by local citizens and federal troops. Convicted of treason and murder, Brown was sentenced to hang. His execution shook the North. Some anti-slavery Northerners denounced Brown's use of violence, and others saw Brown as a martyr. A martyr is a person who dies for a great cause or dies for their beliefs. Now, his death rallied abolitionists, but at the same time, Southerners feared a great Northern conspiracy against them that seemed to be confirmed, and the nation was on the brink of disaster. I hope you've enjoyed this online lesson. Next time we'll get into the election of 1860 and the secession of the Southern states. We'll see you then.